Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another week of the Health Wealth podcast. We have another great episode and another great guest episode today, and it's a returning guest. I'm joined by Ricky Du Plessis, who is back again. We had a great conversation before about all things wrong with the human diet and what humans should be and what they shouldn't be. Ricky was in the process of writing a book, which he still is, and we're going to talk a little bit about how humans have kind of gamed the system and kind of ruined the way that we eat, that we're no longer eating a natural diet. We've made a big mess of it, and Ricky's going to look into how we did that, which I believe is some of the stuff that you're covering in your book. Is that correct, Ricky?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Ryan. So first off, thank you for having me back. It's a great privilege and an honor to be joining you again. And yeah, let's dive right into it. So the chapter, which I call Gaming the System, came about with me trying to address a very awkward question, the question related to if everything that I was learning about human biology and human evolution and what we're sort of biologically adapted to eat and thrive on is correct, then how is it that we have people, and they're out there, they're everywhere, you can see them, who seem to be doing okay on a predominantly plant-based, plant-heavy diet? And that was something that I really wrestled with a bit because I don't want to be ignorant in the book, and I don't want to pretend that plants will just kill you and you're going to die, and everyone who eats plants is going to be sick. So I had to really get into like, how is it? What are the mechanisms at play that allow people to eat what we have available to us here and now in this day and age? And some of them seem to be doing okay on that. And the bottom line that I came to was that using our ingenuity and increased intelligence, since the dawn of agriculture, humans have learned how to overcome our inherent biological restrictions with regard to digestion and nutrient requirements, and to use tools and processes to make otherwise inedible or less optimal things suitable. And we can unpack that a little bit as we go through. But there are three fundamental steps that I found in our history, and those are the discovery and use of fire for things beyond protection and light, so cooking. It was the dawn of agriculture and taking wild plants and domesticating them and breeding them selectively to create things that are more edible and more suitable to our digestive systems. And then the third one is industrialization and learning how to process the hell out of plants to get at the things that we're trying to get at within them. And between those three things, people have learned how to overcome their biology, but I'm not convinced that for the majority of the population, that trying to circumvent biology is the best thing to do. I think in the end, biology probably wins, and that's evident in the general population at this point in time, given our metabolic health crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that the proof's in the pudding, isn't it? And we,
Exactly.
like you said, we found a way to sort of adapt and to survive, but we're not really thriving on it, are we? We've
Exactly.
we've 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 taken it backwards. So when discovering fire, what did that change for us when we did that?
So the discovery of fire, and I've got the book up next to me here so that I can not talk nonsense and I can actually quote properly. So we seem to have discovered fire somewhere around 250,000 years ago. Now, I'll be specific. So we started using fire for cooking around 250,000 years ago. We may very well have discovered and been using fire for a long time before that. And there is some evidence to suggest that as far back as 2 million years, there was a certain group of Homo erectus that there was evidence that they had been cooking food. So that it's a bit of a hot topic amongst the anthropological circle. Some say 250 years ago, some say 780,000 years ago, some say as far back as 2 million years ago. I disagree with the 2 million years ago aspect, and to a degree with the 780,000 years ago aspect, from the perspective of understanding how evolutionary pressures change biology. If we had been cooking as far back as 2 million years ago, I don't see any obvious evolutionary pressure for the advent of our intense stomach acid. That was a evolutionary adaptation to allow us to deal with pathogens in the meat, where we sort of moved out of the trees and stuff and started to forage on carrion. And I don't think that would have happened if we'd been cooking, because cooking would deal with the pathogens as we know it does. So I think it's more likely that 250,000 years ago we started cooking food, and we learned that it increased palatability, and that it made things that were otherwise a little bit more difficult to eat easier to eat.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And interestingly, actually, I've just recorded a podcast episode yesterday, which will be going out further in the future with a guy as a biohacker, and he eats all of his meat raw.
Hmm.
And so, it's still possible for humans to do that. Like you said before, that our stomach acid is very high compared to, the rest of the animal kingdom. And
Yeah.
and that, as you say, that would have allowed us to scavenge, to eat meat that was, maybe even going off,
Hmm. Yeah.
fermented and raw, and be able to eat it and survive. So, like you said, that would definitely signal that we probably didn't have fire all that time, because, as you say, there wouldn't have been so much need for it. So, do you think, because I know that some people speak about this, do you think that cooking loses some of the nutrition in food as well? Because I know some people say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I think that there's a trade-off between the nutrient density and the digestion, because we know that cooking increases the digestibility of foods, meat included, makes it far easier for us to digest. But there is that trade-off with the nutrition then. So yeah, I do think that there's a trade-off there. I think eggs, for example, I know that scrambling eggs is probably the worst way to cook them, because you really lose a lot of that nutrient availability by scrambling them.
Okay, so there's obviously differences in the different ways. What there's better ways to cook things, like say with a steak and
Mm.
with meat as well. What are the better ways to cook it to keep more of the nutrient value?
So I think with a good steak, you probably want to have it as close to blue as possible. So the raw meat, I can see how that is still the most nutrient dense version of that piece of meat. And then cooking it will increase the digestibility, but you're also then killing some of the nutrition. Not all of it, for sure.
Yeah,
Like, definitely not all of it. And I'd be skeptical as to how much of a difference that really makes in practical everyday terms. Like,
yeah.
are you really going to see that much of a difference? I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it enough.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think same as you, that maybe there's some marginal benefits, but I think, especially if you look at the amount of people that are absolutely thriving and doing amazing on a meat only diet, but are cooking it,
Mm.
clearly you're getting great benefit from it too. The guys that like to eat it raw would say that maybe there's a bit of a benefit. So I'd say, like you say, it's probably marginal, if anything, really along there. I wouldn't think it changes too much about it. So we got fire. Did the introduction of fire. Obviously, it meant that we could cook the foods. We maybe lost the nutritional value there. What new foods did it allow us to eat? What did we introduce to our diet when we
Well,
discovered it?
it opened up the possibility to eat things that we otherwise couldn't. So let's look at potatoes, for example. Um, I'm going to mispronounce it, but there's a particular plant toxin, potatoes. I want to say it's solanine. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation. Um, but if you try eat raw potatoes, you are going to do yourself a bit of a disservice. Like, at best, you're going to give yourself a very upset, very angry stomach. But at worst, you can end up killing yourself. And in fact, fun fact, potatoes kill more people than sharks do every year globally through solanine poisoning.
Yeah.
Now, you could lie with statistics and suggest that implies that potatoes are more dangerous than sharks, but we won't go there. But yeah, so potatoes have an inherent toxin. You have to cook them to neutralize that toxin, and then they're edible for you. And there's a few other examples like that, things that you cannot eat raw. You have to cook first. So fire, I can't say where in the timeline these started to become introduced, but you can clearly see that having access to fire and the ability to cook something broadened the horizon of what was possible to eat and would have helped from a survival perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's it, isn't it? It's a survival, which is, most of these adaptations we've made that you've talked about, they would be classed as survival, even
Mm.
with the agriculture and industry as well, be it making sure there's enough food for people, but it doesn't mean that it's a positive to us
Yeah.
in terms of our health, does it? And like you said, there's I think quite a few nuts have to be cooked or they're poisonous, and beans
Mhm.
and things like that. So yeah, it definitely would have, even if, like you say, even if we didn't start straight away with those foods, it opened up the possibility that we could consume those foods at some
Yeah.
point, which obviously at some point we did, began to expand into them. So obviously that's why we discovered fire. We began to cook foods. We opened up the possibility to eat more foods. What was the kind of the driving force or the catalyst between that caused the kind of the agricultural revolution when we really started with agriculture?
So Dr. Mickey Bendor out of the Tel Aviv University has a very good, well, he has several good papers on this. And what he posits is that at the end of the ice age, the end of the last ice age, we faced a mass extinction of the megafauna, which
Mm,
had been our primary sort of food source, the mammoths and all the big sort of ruminant animals. Um, and with that extension, we were driven to rely more and more on smaller game, which the return for the effort put into the hunt started to become unbalanced. You weren't getting as much back from the effort that you were putting in. And that really was the driving force behind looking to domesticate both animals and plants. And then that was the dawn of agriculture, circa 12,000 years ago.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, I know you can see in skeletons, when people are looking back at human skeletons, you can see a marked difference in skeletons from that point onwards from agriculture, where we began to be smaller brains
Mhm.
and things like that. What were some of the first things that we began to bring in with agriculture? Was it grains and things like that? What did we start with?
Yeah, it depends on where you are in the world, but yeah, so grains like wheat originated in the Middle East, and then spread from the Middle East into Asia and into Europe. I don't have the definitive timeline on exactly what we started eating and when, but certainly we started looking at domesticating
Mm,
plants. And what we started doing was taking plants that weren't necessarily, well, they just weren't great to eat. So let's take the wild mustard plant, for example. Now, the wild mustard plant was bred into several different plants that people today take as everyday staples. So broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale. Um, what was the other one? Brussels sprouts, and then there's a sixth one, kohlrabi or something to that effect. So all of these, the sort of cruciferous veg, came from the wild mustard plant. You didn't find broccoli growing out in the wild. Over years and years of agricultural intervention and people meddling, we bred that to make it more edible.
yeah,
So I think at the beginning of agriculture, we were faced with trying to domesticate things that weren't great for us to eat, but it was most of what was available, and survival pressures. And you're 100% correct. It's not optimal. It was a survival move. People didn't go to agriculture and forming big cities because this was the most optimal way to live. This was like, crap, we're dying because we can't find food.
yeah,
And we need to make a plan, and coming together and working together to try and get the most benefit out of what was available is what made sense.
yeah,
And yeah, we faced incredible through early agriculture, especially, we faced incredible health decline, and that was due to a number of factors. So there was the decline in nutrition, but then you also had lots of people grouped together in the same space. So now you had big problems with infectious disease and sanitation and things like that. And yeah, human health sort of tanked through the first part of early agriculture. And then as we sort of got our heads around making different things more edible, getting sanitation in place and stuff like that, then it sort of started to creep back up.
yeah. I mean, I think when you're having to, try to genetically modify and force things to be just acceptable that you can eat them, it's pretty clear that that's not going to be an optimal source for you. And
Yeah.
the majority of what we changed about plants, it wasn't even to make them into an optimal food for us. We were just trying to make them um less poisonous so that we could eat them
Yeah, yeah, it was
without
survival
dying.
food. It
Yeah,
was survival food. And it, what Dr. Bendor also puts forward is that the evidence from stable isotopes and from various other factors show that we are hypercarnivore, meaning that digestive system wise, we need at least 70% of our diet in terms of volume to come from animal sources, so animal proteins, fats, and products, eggs and dairy and the like. Um, but we have the digestive flexibility to use plants supplementally for the other 30% where needed. So plants and fungi can supplement our diet where needed, where the meat is not abundant enough. So we had that, but we really had to push into using plants more primarily instead of supplementally in response to survival pressures. Yeah, that seems to be what the evidence suggests, but it wasn't because it was optimal. Like at
yeah,
no point in human history was going back to eating plants like our frugivorous ancestors many long time ago did. It that wasn't because we reached a point of saying that was best and we'll go back to that. And in fact, looking at the sort of the family tree of old world primates, there are a couple branches, and I can't quote the scientific names for them off the top of my head. I'll see if I can dig out the infographic and I'll send it to you afterwards. And you can maybe include it in the show notes. But there are a few branches of old world primates before Homo erectus that went extinct, but their sort of skeletal evidence shows that they were predominantly plant based. And that lineage just didn't continue. And I think it's because it's just too hard
yeah.
to extract the nutrition that we need from it.
Yeah, I've seen that in a talk. I can't remember his name now, but I've seen it in a talk um at I can't remember, maybe low carb down under or something like that. I can't remember his name
Mm.
now, but it might be the same place that you've seen it. I have seen that spoken about, and yeah, it's like you said, we didn't ever choose plants. We didn't have everything available and think plants are the best. It was
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, it was just survival, which is very different. And like you say, our digestive system is not set up for it, despite the fact that vegans, try and argue that it is and that it's not set up for meat. But, it's not. And that's why I think there are so many digestive issues. There's multiple reasons, but we're having too much plants. Like you said, that he thought, maybe 30% was okay, but it's too much. And you find with all bowel conditions, digestive conditions, if you completely remove the fiber, the symptoms go. We're not
yeah,
designed to consume that. And like you say, I think a healthy person with a healthy gut, they can deal with some fiber and it's okay. But for people who are damaged, they can't deal with it. We're not designed for it. So it's,
yeah. And
it's
it's
not
not
optimal.
just the fiber, it's the plant defense chemicals as well,
Yeah.
the anti-nutrients and stuff like that, the lectins and all sorts. Like I know for myself, so we take gluten. Gluten is a protein, but the human body cannot absorb and use it as a protein. So it passes through your digestive system and wreaks havoc on me, like really
Yeah.
wreaks havoc on me. And as we touched on this in the last episode back in September, I didn't realize that I suffered from IBS. I
Mm.
thought that amount of gas and bloating and discomfort was just normal. And it was only after I completely eliminated the wheat out of my diet that I was like, wow, like, so this is how you're supposed to feel? Like, that was mind blowing.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of people that have that same experience. I think that a lot of people are probably, intolerant to gluten. I mean, I think we're all really intolerant to gluten, but like you say, there's a lot of people, especially, probably people who are, under 30 or, under 20, that more recent, they're growing up just thinking that that's how you feel after eating all the time
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah. Yeah,
because
I
of all
did
that
that my whole
food.
life. Like,
Yeah.
I loved pasta, really loved pasta. And
Yeah.
it was one of my favorite things to cook. I've been cooking for myself since I was about 11 or 12 when I first started dabbling in the kitchen. So I thoroughly enjoy cooking. And I'd love making a big bowl of pasta with like a bolognese sauce or something. Like, love it. But every single time,
Yeah.
without fail, I would have gas that could clear a room for the next few hours and I would be in discomfort. And that was just normal. I'd never known any different
Yeah.
until I cut it out.
That's it. Until you try it, you don't realize, like you say, you think it's normal, and then you
Yeah.
change, and then you realize. And so now, I'm sure you're the same. Like, if I ever do. have something that I don't normally eat, and you really feel the effects. And some people think, oh
Yeah,
well, now you can't deal with it. It's like, no, it's just now my normal is different. My normal
yeah,
is feeling
yeah,
great now, and
yeah,
so you
exactly.
notice the difference.
I've gone from a baseline of feeling terrible to
Yeah,
feeling pretty good. And yeah, if I eat the wrong stuff, and I do from time to time, because life is life and it's
yeah,
messy and complicated and stuff. And every now and then you'll go visit friends, or there'll be an occasion or something, and you eat what you're given, because I'm not full of it enough to go to someone else's house and dictate what they should feed me. So
yeah,
I'll happily eat what I'm given, and I'm glad for the company. We may have words if it's vegan. I think I might struggle with that one. But yeah, generally I'll eat what I'm given. And I know what I'm in for. So I know for the next 24 hours I'll fast, and I'll try and get that out of my system. I'll be in a bit of discomfort, have a bit of gas, and that'll be it.
yeah,
And then it'll be done.
yeah, absolutely. It's not natural to have stomach issues and gas after eating. Being bloated is not a normal reaction. That's telling you something's wrong.
No, yeah, yeah,
It's
exactly. But people walk around like this is the normal state that you should have. You've had a meal. I'm a bit bloated now. No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't be that. That's
yeah,
something not right there.
yeah, definitely, absolutely. So we've kind of covered how we got into agriculture and what began to change with that. How much later was it that it got to the industrial stage? Was that quite a
So
long time later?
it depends on how you start to look at it. And let me just, whilst I can, so if we have a look at, so I've got a pretty good list here of things that you can't eat without first sort of cooking them. Um, so processing and or cooking them. So potatoes, lima beans, red and white kidney beans, cassava, elderberries, eggplant or aubergine, depending on where you are in the world, um, bitter almonds, soybeans, all grains, so barley, wheat, rye, oats, green beans, and rice. And that's not a definitive list. That's just examples I could come across, and I've listed out the toxins in each that cooking and all the processing has to nullify before you can touch that stuff as food. Like that stuff will do you harm. Some of those things, like the cassava, in the regions, I think it's South America where it's particularly common.
Mm,
There's regions where consumption over time leads to such a high degree of cyanide accumulation that people suffer metabolic dysfunction and start to suffer negative outcomes like loss of eyesight and loss of feeling and numbness and all sorts of negative things from the cyanide accumulation due to the cassava. And that's even after having processed it and cooked it.
yeah. And there's a common theme for all of them. They're all plants.
Yeah, yeah, it's all
You,
plants. Like the now some people will turn around, and if we go back to your chap that you spoke to, eats raw meat, and people go, oh, but what about the bacteria and the parasites and salmonella and E. coli and stuff like that? And I think the general population is eaten so poorly for so long, and so like so used to using antacids and stuff like that. So you're eating the wrong sort of things, and you're giving yourself digestive issues, indigestion and the like. Then you're popping antacids because you're thinking, oh, it's not what I've eaten that's the problem. It's, oh, I've got too much stomach acid.
yeah,
So let me lower the pH, or let me like lower that and get rid of it. And so you do this over time, and I think you do yourself damage and a bit of a disservice. And then your stomach acid is no longer at the level that's needed to effectively deal with pathogens. And then when you come across some pathogens in your food, your defense isn't there, and they'll take hold. So I think if you took a person, let's say like some of the Hadza tribe or some of the Inuits over in Canada, who had been out in the wild fending for themselves their whole life. They've not come across a Western diet. They've not come across this plant-rich, medicine-rich attempt at trying to survive. You feed them some raw meat and stuff that may very well have pathogens in it, whether it be parasites or bacteria. I think that their stomach acid neutralizes that pretty well, and they deal with it pretty well. Where the average Westerner, probably not the case, but that's because we've done ourselves damage. We've sort of nullified the acidity of our stomachs because we're taught and assumed that the higher the acidity, the worse it is. Like you want those antacids. You don't want the heartburn and regurgitation. It's not about what you're eating, but when it actually is, you've just eaten the wrong thing. That's why you've got indigestion. Stop eating that thing. But that's not how Western world works.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it comes down to the gut as well. You know, we're lowering our acid, and then we're destroying our guts and our gut health, which is what helps with toxins as well.
Yeah.
And you know, we in our bodies we have parasites and bacteria, viruses. You know, we have everything in our body and in
Mm,
our gut living, but it's balanced. And I think when we're in terrible gut health, something can come in and we're already unbalanced, and then it can take over and take hold and be ill, and you get ill from it and sick. But I think if you're healthy, if you have a healthy gut, and as you said, your stomach acid is good, then it's not going to bother you. Your body can deal with that, like you said, absolutely fine. And we get people, even people that and go carnivore and they get great results. But sometimes they still have some little issues they need to sort, and sometimes it is just improving their stomach acid. They have to take
yeah.
some acid to improve that, and then it clears up. So it just shows, like say, just backs up what you're saying about that we've damaged that and we've lowered those levels from what
Mm.
they should be, which is what's affecting us.
Yeah, fasting is also a fantastic tool for that.
Yeah.
I'm just over halfway through a 5-day fast at the moment. So I started Sunday evening at 5:30 UK time. So 5:30 this evening, that'll be 72 hours. And looking into the literature behind that, like you completely overhaul your body basically. Like you give your digestive system a good amount of rest. You go through autophagy, so you're recycling all those cell components and forming new proper functioning cells. You do the same with your immune system as well. It just recycles the old sort of immune cells and generates new ones. You boost your stem cells. There's so much good stuff that happens through a prolonged fast. So I think, yeah, like you say, someone who's gone to a nutritional lifestyle intervention and is still struggling, I think that there's a good case that some fasting included in that lifestyle intervention would help them really reset and get back to baseline correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you know, digestion takes a lot of energy. I think
Mm.
the gut, you know, for digestion and our brain are about the two most sort of energy hungry organs that we have. And if we're
Yeah.
constantly eating, it's hard for it to really reset and the body to do much. And like you said, the immune system, I think about 80 to 85% of the immune system's in the gut. So if that's constantly digesting food, it can't sort out the immune system. So yeah, I think fasting is an absolutely great tool that people should use, whether that's intermittent or whether that's longer fast. I mean, 2 days is the longest I've done, to be honest. I haven't got any longer. At some point I probably will do one, but I mean, how are you feeling so far?
I'm feeling amazing. I've the experiment that I'm doing this time around. So I've done 120-hour fasts twice before. I've attempted it a few more times than that, but got to sort of 48 to 72 hours and then jacked it
Mm.
in. Um, so the two times before that I've been successful, I've chosen not to exercise during the fast, thinking that it would make sense to take it easy. But what I've since learned and come across is that actually you do yourself a bit of a disservice because you diminish your returns. And if you keep your activity level at baseline, so that the same as you otherwise would, you retain the stimulus to then not lose muscle mass. And you're also getting better use of your body because you're placing that stimulus and that demand on your body and you're forcing your systems to function. So I've trained and I do calisthenics. So it's high intensity, heavy training. And I'm a heavy dude. I'm 96 kilos. So for a body weight pull up for me, that's a lot of effort. Like this is a good amount for me to shift. Um, so the point I want to get at, the experiment that I was running was I know that gluconeogenesis supplies all the glycogen that I need, not just for the cells that need it, but also for my muscles, for the intramuscular glycogen to power me through moderate to intense exercise. And I wanted to see if I'm not eating anything, is gluconeogenesis in the liver still sufficient to replenish my glycogen reserves to allow me to continue training at that level of intensity over a prolonged fast. And so far, so good. So Monday, I didn't train because work bloody got in the way. Tuesday, I did it. So yesterday, a bloody good leg session, and I was very surprised at the energy levels that I had. And I thought, okay, well, I ate on Sunday. I didn't train on Monday. So it's logical that I still had intramuscular glycogen reserves that I hadn't used on Monday. So I've spent them on Tuesday, and it was a good exercise session. So I thought, okay, well, we'll see today. And earlier today, I've done a heavy upper body session. So pull-ups, push-ups, core work, multiple sets of them, all supersetted as well. And again, really good level of energy. Got through the workout, no problems with energy, felt great. And I still feel great now. I don't feel like I'm going to die. I'm not going to fall over. I'm feeling pretty good at the moment. So I'll send you, I've got screenshots. I use a heart rate monitor that tracks your amount of effort, and it shows the average heart rate, the max heart rate, and where that workout sat in terms of intensity. And I'll send that over, and you can post that in the show notes. But yes, I'm nearly 72 hours into a fast and still training like that, no problem at all, which suggests to me that from the fats being released from my adipose tissue, as I'm having to burn fat for fuel now because I'm not taking anything in exogenously, my liver's able to use those lipids and go through the process of gluconeogenesis and provide the glycogen needed for my muscles to get through that training. And we'll see tomorrow is another big leg session, and then Friday will be another big upper body session. And we'll see, does the energy level stay up, or do I start to struggle? And that's the experiment that I'm running at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm pretty sure it will do. I know Tim Noakes has done some great research in kind of that space of, fat adapted athletes, and they actually showed in a study that the fat adapted athletes versus high carb, and the fat adapted athletes after exercise actually replenish their glycogen quicker than the high carb athletes. So yeah, I think definitely once you're fat adapted and your body's working like that,
So I'm
there seems to
familiar
be
with the
no issue.
studies, but they tend mostly to look at endurance activities, which is why I wanted to continue with the high intensity training, because
Mm.
that's the one thing that people always hit back with. The people who are concerned about athletic performance will be like, well, yeah, there's fat adaptation, and yeah, there's literature to show that for endurance activities that's arguably superior, or at least it's adequate. It's not a disadvantage. But what about the high intensity stuff? So we know that uses glycogen. What about that? Why don't you see Olympic sprinters on carnivore and blah, 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 blah. So I'm doing this to sort of show that, well, no, it's not just the endurance stuff. Like you can do the high demand, high intensity interval training
Yeah.
not face a disadvantage.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And your glycogen levels will be the same as the
Mm.
other, the high carb. Our body just, gives us everything that we need in there. So yeah, no, that's it. Was really interesting. It's interesting stuff. I like to, to delve into that and to see the figures. So that'd be great. We had Alex McDonald on recently. If you've heard of him, he did the 5 marathons in 5 days.
Yeah,
So we were talking to him about stuff which was really interesting. So yeah, it's great. I'm hoping that there's going to be more and more research done in that space, because that's one of the areas where really they try and push back against it a lot in the athletic
yeah,
realm, and kind of saying that you can't do it without carbs. But it seems that most things you can, and obviously we need to keep pushing back and get more research there. So yeah, anything
yeah.
along those lines is brilliant. In it with the industrial, going back to the
Mm.
when we moved into sort of the industrial age, what were the first things that we started to do from that? The new things that we began to able to do, new foods we began to be able to eat.
So we first learned how to process plants, and we use grains as a good example, because we learned that we could get at the wheat germ, but there was a process to get there. So we had to separate the chaff. So we had to what's it called? You had to remove the hull, and then you had to process it. So winnowing in the first instance, and then threshing, and then you got your sort of pile of grains that you could then go and you could boil them to eat the wheat berries, as they called. And I think that was probably the first way wheat was consumed. And then some time later on, we learned that if you crushed this, you could make a flour, and that could be used to make a porridge or bread and so on and so forth. But so there was that pre-industrial revolution processing of plants. Same with cassava. We learned, and many bean varieties, we learned that if we soak them in water and then boil them afterwards, that you neutralize the toxins and then you're able to use it as a source of nutrition. So there's a long history of doing stuff like that. But then we get to the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s, and we start doing this en masse, and it starts to become not about providing food. It starts to become about making profit. And you have major companies set up, and you start to gain monopolies, and you see where this is going. And then we started inventing foods. So now we weren't taking natural foods or natural things and making them edible. Now we were taking all of those things and starting to combine them in ways that made brand new stuff that you cannot find anywhere in nature. A bar of chocolate, for example, you cannot find that anywhere in nature. Cream soda, I don't even know what cream soda is, but you're not going to find that anywhere. You're not going to go to a fruit and squeeze it and you've got cream soda. Like Coca-Cola is the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
it just we started inventing foods in the name of chasing profit, and along the line, the scientists involved in putting together the combinations of stuff discovered what we call bliss point, which is the point of deliciousness in a substance that you consume, whether it's a food or beverage, that then elicits a endorphin response because it's so great. And your brain recognizes that your brain loves endorphins. It's a little endorphin junkie, right? It recognizes that there was a particular behavior that resulted in that release of endorphins. We quite like endorphins. We'll release more dopamine, which is your motivation hormone, to encourage you to do that behavior more often, because then we get the endorphins. And this starts to make food hyperpalatable. And the more hyperpalatable something is, the more you want to eat it. That Pringles, what was their slogan? Once you pop, you can't stop.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
because the shit is engineered to be difficult for you to put down. It bypasses all of your natural hunger and satiety hormones, and it floods you with endorphins so that you want more of it and you'll keep eating more. And you eat by doing that, by having that mechanism of using endorphins to motivate you to eat and bypassing your hunger and satiety hormones, you then easily overconsume. Your body's not able to tell you anymore, you've had enough, you need to stop. You can just munch till it's gone.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Yeah. Definitely. That's absolutely. It's, you can, as we've gone through, you can see that we've kind of gone from being able to eat slightly more foods to being able to grow and slightly, you know, tame or slightly change foods so that we can consume them, to now, like you said, we're just creating foods that are not natural. Like even, with certain animals, they might have to adapt slightly to a different diet to survive in a habitat, but they're still eating something that's natural, comes from the earth. They've
Yeah.
adapted to that. We've just gone far too far along that journey, haven't we? And we're creating these foods now that are not
Yeah,
real foods.
exactly. I mean, I can't tell you whose quote it is. It's not mine, but I've heard it and it's absolutely true. It goes, man is the only creature on the planet intelligent enough to create his own food, but simultaneously the only creature on the planet stupid enough to choose to eat it.
Yeah.
And we've gone from this place of where, in response to survival pressures, we've had to domesticate animals and plants, adapt to agriculture, learn how to cook and process stuff to make it edible so that we can survive. And then you would think with our technology advancements, at some point we would have then started to look at going back toward what was optimal. And now it's not about surviving anymore. We have abundance. We have the technology to do pretty much what we want. Let's start being optimal, but that's not what's happened, because we've created companies and it's become about profit,
Yeah.
and it's become about monetization. And so it's become all about what sells and not about what's best.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that. I think, do you think that if we'd reached that point where, obviously, like you say, we're at a point now, there's more than enough food. We are abundant. You can eat whatever you want. If we'd got to that point before the money had become involved in that, do you think that there was a chance that we would have gone back towards what was more optimal? Do you think the money is the main thing that prevents us from doing that?
I'd like to think that maybe we would have in the ideal world, but it's hard to say. It's
Yeah.
really hard to say. But yeah, the moment it became not about you growing and looking after your own food, it became about, oh, you can walk over there and that person's selling the stuff that you need. And all you have to do is this little transaction, whether it was bartering in the first instance and trading goods for services or whatever, to the point where it was then cash money that you could use. And yeah, that transactional relationship where you didn't need to look after your own nutritional sustenance, you could outsource that by paying someone else to do it. The incentive for them is then to make it more attractive for you to come and buy their stuff. And it's not necessarily aligned with what is best for your health. And that has just skyrocketed with sort of capitalism and monopolies and stuff like that. And it is the unfortunate side. I'm a capitalist at heart. It's hard to imagine a world where we don't have that free enterprise. But yeah, the downside of it is I think people just need to recognize the number one priority of those corporations is their profit,
Yeah.
not your health. And as
Yeah.
long as you're mindful of that and you're taking responsibility back into your own hands to make better decisions about what you're consuming, you're okay. Like I don't think that industry is necessarily the devil. I think that people just blindly outsourcing their health and not taking personal responsibility for it is where that has been allowed to grow out of control.
Absolutely. That's the message that we try and push here all the time. It's taking that personal responsibility. Your health is your health and you should be in charge of it. And like you say, the food companies, they're there to make money.
Mm,
That's what they're there for. And when stuff's being marketed as health products and good this and good that, you got to remember it's just marketing. And you say you need to look at it and think is this actually real food I'm getting? Because like you said, the food they've made as well. It's not like we've made food that's great for us and has all the nutrition we need and is good. That it's empty. It's empty nutrition. It's just
yeah.
just calories and, as you said, looking for that bliss point and the sugars and whatever else to make us eat it. And it's nothing to do with health. It's the opposite almost. And
Mm,
so we really have to take stock of that and take responsibility ourselves for what we're eating and the results we get from it.
yeah. So it's where I've gone with the book going through that. So fire, agriculture, industrialization, and processing. I've pointed out that we're at the point now where you can't just eat what's available because what's available is not aimed at your nutrition. You're better served by taking a step back, recognizing your inherent biological restrictions, identifying foods that align with those biological restrictions, so things that are nutrient dense, that have the essential nutrients that you need, the stuff that your body doesn't make itself, and therefore you have to take it exogenously, and have it in a bioavailable form, meaning that you can actually, without having to cook the hell out of it or process it in a factory, you can extract that nutrition and use it. And if you recognize what that is, and that's what you shift your dietary pattern towards, you will thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I mean, bioavailability is another important point with when it comes to plants, as you said, like we have to look at what naturally are we meant to eat. And we are set up to eat animal products that things come in bioavailable forms. Yes, there's vitamins and nutrients and minerals we can get from plants, but most of them are in the wrong forms. They're in plant forms.
Yeah,
We have to convert them. We can do that, most people, but not very well. And so you have to look at that and say, okay, well, if it's that difficult for us to extract the nutrition from it, it's also coming with these toxins. Is that the best thing that we should be eating? And
yeah,
look at, is there something better, which there is?
yeah. I think Dr. Chafee summarizes it pretty well. And I'll paraphrase what he said because I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of everything that you need, you can get in meat. Everything. There's nothing that your body needs that you cannot get from meat. there's also everything that you get in plants is not what you need. Like it's that opposite relationship. You can have everything that you need just from meat, but you cannot get it just from plants. It's impossible. You have to supplement the hell out of your diet if you're trying to rely just on plants. You have to process the hell out of the stuff to make it available for you so that you can even digest it in the first place safely, like for the majority of plants.
Yeah. Again, which again just shows us that it's not our natural diet. And if someone wants to include plants in your diet, then you go do that, but just understand about eating what's natural for us. And like you said, I can't remember the guy's name. I have heard him speak before, but he said, we need at least 70% from animal products. So if you're eating that and the 70%, we can probably handle the 30% of plants if we're eating 70% of what we should be eating. But people now are at 80, 90. Obviously there's vegans at like 100% plant
Mm-hmm.
products, and it shows that the standard American diet is 8 70 80
Yeah,
percent plant products, isn't it? Plant based.
yeah,
So it shows us that that's not the way. It's not natural. You can see what's happened to our health. We need to look at as you have in this book and as we've talked about, what's actually our natural diet, and let's try and eat as close to that as we can.
yeah,
You're probably not gonna be able to do exactly that nowadays, but
exactly.
if we can get as close as we can, that's going to be good for us.
I've had that exact sort of discussion with people before who, for them, the enjoyment of life is the highest goal.
Hmm.
And I try to come at it from the perspective of, I agree, you want to enjoy your life, and that suggests that you want a good quality of life. But you start to suffer with a non-communicable disease or an autoimmune condition or a mental illness because your diet has eroded your metabolic health and the disease is onset, your quality of life starts to drop down a very steep curve. And I'm not convinced that that's the best way to see out your years. Like I would happily forego the chocolate or the ice cream or the whatever, knowing that it's going to improve my quality of life over the long term.
Yeah.
This view that you can have your cake and eat it doesn't work out in the long run.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it is that quality of life. I think most people nowadays, their life basically starts ending around 50, 60 years old, even earlier maybe, because once your health goes, that's the whole thing of the podcast, it's health wealth, because your health is wealth. And once your health starts going down and you can't do the things you want to do, you can't enjoy life, you're wasting 40, 50 years of your life where you could have enjoyed yourself. Was it worth it just to eat, pizza and pasta when
Mm.
you were younger? You have to look at the
Yeah,
long term, I think.
no, I agree with you 100%. The part of the inspiration for the book is knowing what I know now. I wish I could go back because I had some very, very dear to me family and who I lost to lifestyle illnesses,
Mm.
not knowing at the time that nutrition could play such a crucial intervention role
Yeah.
in what they were suffering with. And you watch a person that you're near and dear to suffer like that for years, so Alzheimer's, dementia, cancer, things like that, and you watch them decline, and just the suffering over years is way worse than their death. Like
Yeah.
their death is final and their death is permanent and you miss them, but you're happy that their suffering is finished. And that's a horrible place to be at.
Yeah. No,
Like
I
I
completely
wish
agree.
I could go back and share, at least have the opportunity to share the knowledge with them and just give them the choice.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're 100% right. Like I wish more people would get it. Like there's little trade-offs now to adjust your lifestyle from what Western secular society has suggested it should look like. But if you get that and you start aiming at optimal, you don't necessarily have to be perfect. Like consistency is the key to success, not perfection. Like no one can be perfect all the time. But if you are consistently making choices to put your health first, you will enjoy a far longer, far better life than otherwise would be possible.
Absolutely. And I think being healthy and feeling good every day makes life very enjoyable anyway. Even if you're not eating cake and pizza, I enjoy life much more feeling healthy
Yeah,
without eating that stuff than I did when I was eating it. And you feel rubbish afterwards and you regret it instantly. And life's much better without it.
yeah, yeah, 100%.
Perfect. Listen, I've taken a lot of your time. I know you have to go. So I just want to again thank you again for coming on. Before you go, again, give us a shout out for where people can find you, and if you know,
Yeah.
let us know how long it will be, before the book's coming out, and obviously when it does, we'll give that a shout out too.
Yeah, all good. So I'm hoping to have the book, the manuscript at least finished in the next couple of months, and then the process of talking to publishers and then sort of getting it under publishers' noses starts. So I can't give a hint as to when it'll be published. The reason I'm going to publishers rather than self-publishing is I'm not naive enough to think that I can market it effectively. And the book can be the best thing in the world. If it's ineffectively marketed, it's not going to sell.
Mm.
It's just not going to get out there. Equally, it can be absolute garbage, but if it's effectively marketed, it will sell. So I'm wise to that fact. So I'm going to try in the first instance to land a proper publisher and lean on their experience for the marketing because I know I don't have it. That being said, I am doing what I can on social media. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Ricky Du Plessis, with a little stake at the back of my name. That's how you know it's me. There's not many Ricky Du Plessis in the world. I think there's maybe four of us in the all of LinkedIn. I'm the one with the stake at the end. And then you can find me on YouTube and on Facebook on animal-based dad. So animal-based-dad. That's my handle. And I will be using the same on Instagram and TikTok and maybe even Twitter as well. I need to expand my social media repertoire. I'm not quite there yet. And what I'm doing on there is sharing little sound bites, little snippets, my thoughts and suggestions. And I'm actually tracking my 120-hour fast on there as well and giving periodic updates. And the other thing that I'm going to do predominantly on YouTube, but I'll share the YouTube videos to the other platforms as well. I've recognized in the writing of the book that a big challenge that a lot of people face is confidence in the kitchen. There's a large majority of people that just aren't comfortable cooking for themselves from scratch. And I want to do, like I said earlier, I've been cooking since I was about 11 or 12. I'm no chef. I've never had any professional training, but I know my way around the kitchen and I'm very comfortable in it. And I want to give almost tutorials, taking biologically appropriate animal-based food or recipes and step by step working through them just to give people that little confidence, that little sort of show and tell how to do it. So I'll be sharing that on YouTube and hopefully people will find that helpful.
Yeah, that's great. I think as well, it demonstrates how easy it is as well. I think people think that it's complex and things like that. So I think that's a great idea to be sharing that. And once people see, oh, okay, it's this easy, I can do that, makes them
Yeah,
more likely to try it. So that's brilliant.
yeah. Practice is the key to success, and I just want to give people the courage to just practice. You're not going to get it right the first time and every time, and yeah, it's just repetition and practice with cooking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again for your time, Ricky. And we will put all your links in the show notes so people can easily find you, follow you. And as I say, when the book does come out, we will give it a shout out on here and let people know. So thank you
That's
again.
awesome.
Thank you, everyone else, for listening. We'll see you again next week and let's get optimal together.